Did anybody ever check that? No, okay. So either I forgot to record or I've got to go back and pull that out. Because I know Brittany's still in the black belt class and she was going to catch up and watch some videos too. So anyway, so we're now recording. So yeah, so we're now doing the second half of session 10, design of experiments. So we're down about here, 33.2 hours worth of going through it. So you guys should have wrapped that all up by now, and we should be able to talk about it and ask questions. I'm going to work through a little example today, and we're going to try to make some pizza. So that's where we are with that. Go ahead, move on. Yeah, there's nothing new on the scorecard. I'm not updating that anymore. Tips and tricks here. We're going to work through a design of experiments. Yeah, so this is, I'm just going to present this first because the rest of the time we're going to work through an example on design of experiments. But make sure in your analyze phase, read through the toll gate stuff, of course, once again. And also make sure that you're looking at those black belt videos at the end of this section. I think they're particularly good in the analyze phase. And since the analyze phase is sort of a bread and butter area for black belts as opposed to green belts, make sure you sort of spend some extra time understanding particularly this sort of piece of it. So what I want to do is I want to maybe compare pizza recipes a little bit and see how you guys did. So there was a challenge last week to go into the Rocket Pizza and see what you could come up with for a recipe for pizza. And I guess I'm just going to throw out to the class at this point. Does somebody want to share a recipe before we kind of delve into this, or sort of talk a little bit about what you did or what you tried to do in this? Even if we just sort of talk about it conceptually a little bit.
So just to jump in here quickly, Eric.
Okay, sure.
I don't have the actual results in front of me of what we did, but I don't know if everybody got basically the same results. I think by the time we did the second experiment, we hit about 9.97, about 9.8 on both the taste and consistency. And then I'll be honest, I didn't try to do better than that. So if we're just going from an ultimate score standpoint, the highest score, right? That's probably about the highest that I achieved. Okay,
good. And so Dominic, just walk through it. So the way you got there, you did a resolution 4 experiment first, a screen, sort of walking through the example steps there and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to mix up this one versus the castle simulation where I kept on launching, items out of the trebuchet, and I was hoping to see some, animation of that castle, eventually falling apart, but it never got there. I don't know. I don't know if that's designed that way, but yeah, we did resolution 4 experiment, and I guess I could go back to my notes, but just basically followed the instructions themselves were very intuitive for this experiment, and I didn't have a problem with. I actually used Engine Room for this, and setting it up.
So you did use Engine Room?
I did, yes. In this case, I had some problems with the outputs for some of the previous practices, but for this one, it came out relatively clean and matched models that I was seeing.
Okay, good. So, Cassie, you or Judy have any sort of luck with making pizza and doing the DOE stuff? I know it's sort of a challenging thing if you haven't done these sort of things very much before. Judy, you got something?
Well, I'm just going to confess up front that I actually didn't do the exercise, so I'm listening to the wisdom of others.
Okay.
I'm a little bit behind. I had an intense couple of weeks of other things. Okay. So rather than pretend, I'm just going to say, but I'll listen happily to anybody else.
Yeah. No, we're going to walk through this a little bit. So, and then, Cassie, do you have like sort of any comments? Are you like, have you tried some of these design experiments?
I did not do the pizza one. I was kind of reading this one, but I was focusing on the improvement module. That's the next module, just because that's where my team is at right now.
Yeah, that's right. You told me you were sort of jumping ahead to try to get into some of that stuff. Okay, good. Well, I'll tell you what. For Dominic, you kind of can sort of help me sort of walk through this. I do not do. And I guess I just want to sort of confess up front. I have never done a design of experiments in real life. The only design of experiments I've done have been these little sort of simulation things through MoreSteam. But I am just, super stoked. When I guess I took a class in design of experiments, man, was it? It must have been in like the, late 80s or early 90s, didn't really get it at all, didn't sort of understand it. But then, after working at Hewlett-Packard, looking at some of the things that they were doing in semiconductors with the number of factors that they had to deal with, and then getting the training through MoreSteam and looking at, boy, you got 6 factors here, and doing like just 16 runs and narrowing down to like a really good recipe for making pizza or for whatever you were doing as far as a manufacturing process design. It really showed me some of the power of doing this, and I was kind of an instant convert. So, but like I said, every year at this time, I have to sort of reteach myself design of experiments. So I go through it, I redo the process, try to figure out what my output was last year and why my output this year doesn't exactly match, and kind of go back and go through that. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to go ahead and walk through this rocket pizza once again. So let me do a little sort of share screen once again, or stop sharing, because I want to switch over to Engine Room. And let's go ahead and do that. Let's see. Well, I'm just going to go to my desktop because that'll make it easier. So I got my desktop here. Let's go ahead and minimize that guy. Go to Engine Room. Let's go ahead and close this. So one thing, I guess I'll sort of start out, and we're just sort of jump starting this. What I did is, I went through and ran the design wizard for the experimental design for this. We're going to go through and do that. But I also, once we did that experimental design, got the standard order for the experiment. So the standard design comes out randomized on how you're supposed to run it in random fashion. But it's always easier to sort of work with the data, in standard order. So I reordered it into standard order, and I've got the output for my resolution 4 level design, the 16 runs for taste and consistency, all in this spreadsheet. So I'm just going to go in and let's start out with if you went into Analyze, you can do your design of experiments planning worksheet, which I had already done. Let's see. I think that's what this is. Yeah. So I went through and did the planning worksheet, just sort of work out, what my experiment was going to look like. Just some basic sort of information in front. So it's going to be a resolution 4, 1/4 factorial, 16 runs, and then what the response variables were, taste and consistency, and what the factors were, and the number of levels for each factor is what we're looking at. So I went and I did that, and then the next thing is coming through on Analyze, coming up and doing the design wizard. So that's real helpful in Engine Room. So as far as the design wizard goes, let me save changes on that. I'm going to close that. And what I want to do is start a new design wizard. And I'm going to go through the guide me portion. So when we're doing this, let's see, max. So we're going to do the pizza at 2 levels, right? So each factor only has 2 levels. We've got, you know, the factors here. So eventually we're going to get, you know, all 6 factors that we're going to put in. I'll show you sort of the completed one. The factors that we're using are categorical. So even when we had flour, they weren't putting in the actual number of cups or pounds of flour. They were just saying more or less, which I think was a, you know, kind of a nice shortcut in order to make it easier to run the experiment. So all these things change over to categorical. I'm just going to hit, well, let's see, let's go ahead and flip them all just so that the wizard doesn't think anything funny here. So if I was doing this, you know, seriously, I'd write in like flour and all the things for the different factors, and I'd enter in what like the levels were. So more flour or less flour, more flour, or virgin, extra virgin olive oil, what the different levels were in the experiment. We'll take a look at that. It comes down and asks you what the number of runs are for your experiment, or excuse me, asks you the number of factors and then how many runs you want to do. So we're going to do 16 runs. It's a level 4 resolution. We're switching over, because this is kind of a rough level, so we're only doing a level 4 resolution, setting the significance level of what we're looking for at 10% or 0.10 makes sense. I'm just going to do, you know, since we're looking for what the basic levels are, we're just going to keep the number of replicates down. Blocks, we don't really have any blocks. Blocks might be if there was differences in shifts or things that we didn't care about that we're going to enter in the experiment, but we don't really have any blocks on this. And then I really didn't know sort of what to do with the effect size, so keeping it at the default levels and the default standard deviations, you know, makes a lot of sense, right? So there, we look at this with the number of replicates is just 1. So we've got, you know, our experiment, and we're going to create the design. And what it does is it tells you sort of what the levels are. I'm going to go ahead and close this and open it up where I already did the design. And let me see, 4 factors, 6 factors. There we go. This is the one I want. So I'm going to edit this. So this is what it looks like when you had all the actual information put in with regards to what the levels are and also what the results outputs were. I guess, you know, one thing I could have done to be kinder and gentler to you guys is I could have given you actually the outputs for these so you didn't have to sit there and run those little experiments and record them. But I think it's important for you as black belts to get the feel for, you know, that level of pain in doing that. You know, of course, if you're doing this in real life and you actually had to wait 20 minutes for every pizza that was coming out, and you had to eat and taste 16 pizzas, the level of pain would be magnified even more. So a little bit of, you know, pushing the button and recording probably wasn't sort of too much to ask. So when I sort of work with this in order to sort of see how this breaks out, I always, even though it gives you it in randomized order, it's important to run these things in random order when you actually do the experiment. For working with the data and working in the experiment, I like to switch it over to standard order. So this is standard order, and you can see once you put it in standard order, you know, the way the factors change is much more systematic, right? So in standard order, flour goes cheap, expensive, cheap, expensive, cheap, expensive. You know, yeast goes less, less, more, more, less, less, more, more. Olive oil goes, you know, virgin, virgin, you know, extra virgin. So you can kind of see that the factors become, you know, more systematic in the pattern that you're looking at, right? So you can kind of see what the coverage is. You know, it's nice that MoreSteam and Engine Room is able to, you know, generate these designs and this pattern for you, but, you know, you can do these things manually. There are books where you can look up that can sort of teach you how to, you know, create your own designs. But it's nice that, you know, this is done in MoreSteam for you, okay? So once you've got that design in standard order, you know, you go and you run your experiments with these settings, you know, for each one. And once the pizza's done, you get your output on taste and consistency. You enter the numbers here in the spreadsheet. And, you know, eventually you enter all, you know, 16 times 2 pieces of data here in that last column. So these last 2 columns are the only 2 that we have to actually do. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Save Changes on that. And then I'm going to go up and I'm going to go to my Design of Experiments Analyzer. And let's see, here's my data over here. So I just clicked on that and got that. I've got the design matrix with my 6 factors, and I'm going to go ahead and put that in. And then, let's see. I picked the wrong one. So let me close this. I'm going to delete this study here. I'm going to go back. And I'm going to go to Analyze, Design of Experiments, DOE Analyzer. So I'm back to the beginning. I picked the wrong one. So let's see. There we go. So I was looking for the one where I actually had both taste and consistency in there. That last one that I showed you, this one over here, I actually ran it with like, I did 2 replicates on taste just to sort of see what the difference in the results were. But I went back, so I just want the 16 values. So let's take a look at taste first. So taste is a response variable. And the design matrix is in here. It's going to go ahead and crank away here a little bit. Let's go ahead and maximize the size. So here we are. We're going to take a look at the output. So first off, we've got sort of our half normal effects plot. I'm gonna, well, let's see. So let's take a look. Does anybody know how to change the size on the output on this left-hand side? Has anybody sort of played around and looked at that? I know there's a way to do it, and I just didn't. I didn't re-look that up. But anyway, I apologize for the fact that it's pretty small on the left-hand side here. But looking down, we've got a data summary, number of runs, factors, etc. The factor information. So I've got what the letters are on the factors, and then the name of the factors, the coded levels. So a -1 stands for cheap, and a 1 stands for expensive on flour, if you will. We've got the different half normal effects and what the effect size on there. So it looks like we got a big effect size on kneading. And then we've got the alias structure down here on the left, and we'll come back to take a look at that. I have trouble looking at the sort of the half normal plot. I think it's more useful to look at the Pareto effects plot. And so this is the Pareto effects plot. And we can kind of see with this, these are the things that all the main effects, and two-way effects, let's see, main effects and two-way effects and three-way effects that came out as significant. So we've got F being significant, seems to have the biggest impact. That's the wood. And then we've got A, which is the flour, B, which is the yeast. There's an AF interaction that looks like it's significant. So flour and wood interaction is significant. And then D, which is the kneading, is significant. One of the things we should look at, because the main effects are all aliased with three-way interactions, we can sort of see where all the three-way interactions are that they're aliased with. Generally, we don't worry too much about the three-way interactions. They're pretty rare. They can happen, but that's one of the penalties with doing a lower resolution experiment, or 1/4 factorial as opposed to half factorial, full factorial. You're going to get more aliasing that you have to worry about. But generally, at a resolution 4, main effects are aliased with three-way effects, and three-way effects don't happen very often. What's more of a concern for us is the two-way aliasing. And we notice we've got AF, which is a significant effect, but AF is also aliased with DE. And DE is, kneading and mixer. So what that essentially says to us is we see that AF is significant, right? And that's an interaction between flour and wood, but it could just as easily be an interaction between kneading and mixing, or kneading in the mixer, right? And if we were concerned about that, we'd have to go back and check that as we sort of do our results or in subsequent experiments, all right? So that's the summary output. Let's take a look at the model output. We've got the model output here. So we've got the actual models. So the intercept is 7.12. We've got the rest of the model. What I've done on my spreadsheet is I've put that model here across, and I've sort of actually entered that in spreadsheet form so I can actually plug in numbers and check it. So, so this model taste equals, these variables. Then I've got the variables sort of up above so I can help sort of keep track of it. And then in each one of these cells here, I've created essentially a formula that replicates that model, right? And so when I'm entering into this formula is for cheap flour would be a -1. And then for expensive flour it would be 1. And in sort of entering in the values into that model, it looks like, even at this level, if I just used expensive flour, more yeast, more kneading, or longer kneading, and I used hickory, it gave me a taste of 9.07, which looks to be pretty good. So that would be the output of my model. We're looking down for in the rest of it here. So we've got our effects coefficients, so we can see what the effect sizes are, what the confidence levels are on the different variables there. We look at the p-values and the ANOVA. So between the effect size and the ANOVA significant factors, that's what's going on our Pareto chart values back here. So when we look at this and see that F has this big effect size and it's significant, in the model here, if we're looking at F, it has an effect size of on effect size. Effect size is 2.66 versus the others have smaller effect sizes. And then when we look at, significance, yes, the p-value, it is significant at 0, right? So as opposed to the 0.01 that we put in, 0.10 that we put in for the alpha. Okay. Let's see, the other things that we can look at. So this is the normal probability point. We want to see the points line up along this. That would mean it's a relatively normal distribution. We've got standardized plots, standardized residuals versus fitted. Looks pretty random. Also pretty random. And let's see, so this is the standardized residuals, a histogram plot of what that looks like. So I don't see any sort of specific problems there I'd be concerned about. The other thing on this model, look at the interaction plots. So we can see for each one of the standard effects here, or the main effects, we can sort of see what the effects are here. So this says that for flour, cheap generally gives us a lower value than the expensive. You can kind of see what the slope of that line is, or at least get a graphical representation. Same thing on B, which is the, what was B? B was the yeast, I think. And then C, we see that, virgin has a little bit higher value than extra virgin as far as the main effect goes. But also we know that the olive oil wasn't by itself, a main effect wasn't significant, right? So in here. So we've got some main effects that we can go ahead and take a look at if you want to see that graphically, but it just really sort of reinterprets for you the information on that model output summary. The thing that's really kind of interesting is the interaction effects. So essentially when you're looking at these interaction effects, we're looking at the A-B effect. So A is flour, B is yeast, I believe, right? Yeah, so B is yeast. And looking at this, it looks like there's no interaction. So if these lines are essentially parallel, or don't intersect, that means that there's generally not an interaction between those two things, right? So going down, looks like I've got a little bit of an interaction between A and C, but A and C wasn't significant in the model. The thing that was significant, let's see, is we had AF significant. So I'm going to click on that. So it was AF was significant, right? So I'm not seeing the AF significance there on the interaction. Let me go back to my model. Yeah, so AF is in my model and it's not significant, so I'm not exactly sure. It could be just the fact is that these lines have different slopes. They don't intersect sort of within this diagram, but you can kind of see that, going from 5 to 6 and from 8 to 8.5, maybe that's causing some level of significance. I'm gonna have to scratch my head on that a little bit. Any comments from you guys on that, on your reading, sort of looking at sort of interaction effects? I was expecting AF to be a little bit more of a cross type thing.
I had, Eric, just similar issues when running my models, not for this pizza one, but as I said before, some of the other practices, and definitely wanted to ask the question: Are the actual responses that are being produced out of the let's say the pizza module or out of MoreSteam different depending on user or depending on, because when I compare my values to yours, we're running the same experiment: expensive flour, more yeast, more kneading, hickory. I just pulled up my data and I have a taste of 9.71, consistency of 9.58.
Right.
You know, and I was there spinning my wheels because my data wasn't representative of what I was seeing on some of the
Right.
samples.
And Dominic, that was one of the reasons why I ran like a second set of replicates on this to kind of see if I actually do get data. So every time you run this, you get different, data. So I'm not, I guess it improves the richness of the simulation, right? So we could have 10 students all running sort of different things and then combine the data at all and find, some sort of ultimate value that we could sort of come off with. But the output's different sort of every time. So everybody should have like slightly different output, but each one of these individual variables, has their own sort of normal distribution or whatever, for them. So
the results and everything, it didn't it wasn't a problem, especially getting into the exam at the end, right? I got to the same point, to the same results. But the values themselves were off.
They're slightly off, right?
Yeah, but the interpretation was the same.
Right. Yeah, and because the results are going to be sort of in the same ballpark on individual results, and the overall model hopefully will, compensate for, slight variations or differences. Because the model's really looking for the relationship between the variables.
Right.
So, exactly. Let me see what the BE crosses over, right? So that's the one that we're aliased with the AF. Let me just click through a few more of these. Okay, so it looks like CD, big interaction between olive oil versus old and new machinery. Okay. All right. So these are, depending on what sort of questions you have or things you might be interested in figuring out, these things can supply you with some additional insights. And I don't think the cube is working. Let's see. Okay, so we got every single, individual cube. So what's the, in our model, let's see. So the main effects that we're working with are flour, yeast, kneading, and wood. So that would be A, B, D might be things we'd be concerned about. So A, B, D, right? So on A, B, D, see, so looking at the cube plot on that, where would I want to be? So I want to be, it looks like this is my highest corner back here in the top right. So that would be plus on D. So D is, so more kneading. And then, let's see, so we're plus on A, so it's expensive flour. And let's see, what else we got? And then vertically, it's plus on B, which is more yeast, right? So expensive flour, more yeast, and more kneading tend to give you a higher value according to this cube plot. Okay. We could, I think, so the model, cube plots are limited to, 3 factors. But the thing that when we're in the real world sort of looking at this stuff, you're going to come up with your model, but I think sometimes to, help people get a feel for, where the significant differences are and where the sweet spots are from an operational point, being able to show them something like this cube plot to say, hey, you know, this is sort of where we ought to be operating, you know, I think is a pretty useful thing. Let's see. Okay, so that sort of walks through the design of experiments output. So for me, what it came down to was being able to, you know, for taste, getting my my formula here, and then playing around with setting the values. So if I set the value for A at -1, the value for yeast at 1, the value for kneading at 1, and for wood at 1, I get this sort of value. Setting them all at 1, I get this. When I'm looking at this, rather than just sort of randomly switching these things between high values and low values, or 1s and -1s, if you look at the formula, right, we can see that F and A, right, are interaction. There's an interaction with a negative value. So for F and A, I definitely have to try some negatives in there to flip the sign to see how much it contributes to improving the output. But on B, since there's no interaction, I know that I get like 0.26 of an effect on my taste if I just make B into a 1. So I'm going to pretty much have B is always going to be 1. And the same thing on D. I get a 0.17 effect on D. There's no interaction. I'm going to go ahead and put that in, right? Now, what we're looking at with the negatives here, you know, a negative on A doesn't hurt me too much, because I'm getting, you know, I go down 0.4, right, over here, and then over here I gain back 0.21 because it flips the sign by putting a negative in for A, right? But when I do that, play that same sort of game with F for the wood, so when I put a negative in for wood, I get a negative 1.33, so it's a really hard hit on the wood, and it still flips the sign, so I pick back up 0.21, but that big negative hit on the F value took me down to 6.83. So the best overall thing I could do with this particular model was to have expensive flour, more yeast, more kneading, and hickory wood gave me the best output. Was that, Dominic, was that sort of similar to what you came out with when you sort of, you know, ran additional experiments on there and whatnot?
Yeah, a higher, you know, I got a higher scoring, but it's the same thing.
Right.
Where I had 1s for taste and consistency.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and then for consistency, when we, you know, do that and sort of look at the outputs, we get, you know, this sort of thing for a model where we've got main effects on flour and kneading and yeast are still the main effects. And then we have an AD interaction, so an interaction between flour and kneading on consistency. And I played sort of the similar sort of game with the negatives, but it still came out that, you know, having all positives was the best way to go. So it looks like we're lucky in the fact that taste and consistency line up, and that having high factors on flour, yeast, and kneading both improve consistency and improve taste, and we don't have to make a trade-off between those performance values, which, you know, could very well have happened to us, you know, in an experiment like this, where we'd have to make some sort of trade-off between taste and consistency. But in this result, we don't have to. Okay, so that is it for sort of walking through the design experiments on the pizza. Dominic, you know, I didn't go to a second round What did they ask you to do for like a next round for tuning it in even further on this?
Yeah, so let me go through and try to remember where I started off. So I did just kind of the first, the pizza DOE, starting off the same way that you did.
Right.
Then I just went into the full factorial and basically just confirmed
Okay.
my gut feel. It was just, reduce the number. I believe the at the end of the simulation, it just says, it confirms, what you're seeing in the data already. So, use flour, yeast, kneading, and wood, and then run a full factorial on that, just as a kind of a confirmatory.
Confirmatory sort of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So for full factorial, that was on just those factors, though, or was it full factorial? Because you could leave out. So you'd run a full factorial on 4 factors then.
Right.
Right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just those factors, exactly.
Yeah, just those factors. So you'd leave out the other ones. So it's still more efficient than having done a full factorial on 6 factors, from the get-go. Right? No,
exactly. And basically, it's just illustrating that, as you said, how are you filtering out, those interactions which are not important.
Okay, so Cassie and Judy, talk to us a little bit. How are you feeling at this point? Can you think you can sort of do this sort of thing?
I think so. Eventually.
Yeah, it takes a little bit of practice, and you need to see some different things. This is I like the 2-level thing because of the consistency. So even if you have a continuous variable, putting them in as just sort of more or less or high and low can be pretty efficient to get to where you need to be. But you could also use continuous variables and plug them in there and actually plug in actual values for the number of cups of flour or whatever, to kind of hone your design in even more, right? Or optimize your factors even better.
Eric, this is Cassie. Have you seen companies or manufacturing or whatever it may be actually use this or do it well, or what their outcomes were, or have other groups presented something like this?
Yeah, so my basic take is because running all these experiments, take time and energy for people. People, I know Dominic is people tend to like to guess what the answer is, right? Based on sort of their intuition for what things could be. So you tend to do these sorts of design of experiments in situations where the stakes are pretty high, and you're trying to get closer to a more optimum type value. So like I said, we used to see this a lot in Hewlett-Packard and semiconductor manufacturing, because the difference between, like, say if this was yield on a chip, the difference between a 98% yield and a 99% yield would be worth a couple $1 million. Right? So it'd be worth us to sort of go through the trouble and run these sorts of experiments. So you're going to have to, I think, in your particular cases, in your particular environment, like in the medical industry, you're going to have to take a look and see, well, is it really worth it to go through and do this? I don't know. It might be that I'm trying to think of a situation, especially with regards to like operating room turnover. If you could figure out what some key factors were, and then what would be the case where you would allow people to run an experiment where you actually said, okay, well, let's say, so we could run experiments that, okay, we think one of the factors is the number of nurses, right, that is doing the changeover. So we want to run, say we were running this and we had 5 other factors. So it's this quarter factorial resolution 4 experiment, but we're doing it on operating room changeover. And one of the factors was number of nurses. And so a low number of nurses was 1 nurse, and a high number of nurses was 2 nurses to run it. So half your changeovers you'd run with 1 nurse and half you'd run with 2. I guess, so the question is would you actually do that in your hospital if it was important to sort of figure out if there was because I guess the interaction effect would be if you had 2 nurses doing it and there was some other factor like, I don't know, the number of surgical trays that you're also going high and low with, right? So nurses high and low, surgical trays high and low, and you find out that there's an interaction between the number of surgical trays and the number of nurses, and bad things happen when you have high number of trays and high number of nurses because there's a lot of, collisions or, there's a negative interaction, between those 2 things, right? Design of experiments would sort of confirm that kind of thing for you. But I think, some of those things, intuitively we can kind of say, or just from observing, like when we have 2 versus 1 or something, you might be able to intuitive your way to, some pretty good answers versus, spending the money to do the experiment, right?
In the lean toolbox and all the things and the skills that we're learning, there's definitely ones that are more exciting to use than others, and other ones like, when are we going to do that?
Yeah, I think, generally design of experiments to me is something is after you do all your homework and then you're trying to get to that, optimum sort of performance level, and you say, hey, there's so many interaction things and stuff going on with all these different factors. I just need some clarity as to what the best place to run this operation is. And then you say, okay, let's bite the bullet and do this experiment and get some data so at least sort of the ballpark where you're running. Now, once we have that sort of ballpark defined, so we know it's expensive flour, it's more yeast, and then we're just going to go in and we're going to tune it a little bit. We're going to try some smaller things and smaller little experiments around the limited number of factors in one corner of the model in order to get us where we want to go. So I think it can be useful and use that in that way, right? Okay. So the big thing in Analyze, just sort of overall, just so we don't sort of lose sight and we get too enamored of the mechanics of design of experiments. Ultimately in Analyze, we're trying to figure out what are the key factors that we need to improve or control, and sort of what's the roots cause or the things that are most impacting our performance or the variable or the problem that we're trying to deal with, right? So, from that standpoint, I think it's pretty valuable to be able to do that. Okay. All right. So I'm going to sort of jump back to my slideshow here. Let's go ahead and do this. So that was Rocket Pizza. Like I said, the thing to do is make sure you click on some of these master black belt videos. I think there's some good stuff in here. Hearing people other than me and talk about the importance of the analyze phase and the things you want to be concerned about. Okay, so that's kind of all I had planned for tonight. Is there anything that you guys want to talk about with regards to your projects or different things. So you're going to go ahead and proceed on to the improve phase now. So I'm going to figure it out.
This is Cassie. So there's there's 3 projects, right? There's the mini project for the class. And then beyond that, for the black belt, that's the independent one and the one that we're monitored or tutored on.
Right. So there's 3 projects: a mini project, independent project, and a mentored project. And the independent and mentored project are supposed to be sort of pretty big and significant. But yeah, 3 projects. Okay. You know, one thing you can, and I've talked to other people about this, you can expand your mini project into your independent project if you would like, or into your mentored project. So really, you know, you've done sort of 10 tools, but maybe you really haven't solved the problem or moved the needle with regards to the thing you were trying to do. And if you want to kind of keep on going and expand that into a full-fledged project, you know, that's fine also. Okay.
Now those 2 other bigger, larger projects,
right,
you're due anytime in this?
Right. So once, yeah.
Go on.
Yeah. So once you finish this class, then you're, and you get like 80% or better on the final exam, then you're qualified to go ahead and proceed into the certification class. What I recommend is do your independent project first. You don't have to pay any money for that. You go ahead and practice. All you need to do for your independent project is turn me in a report at the end, which has sort of a summary of your results, you know, 1 page of description of what you did for define, 1 page for measure, analyze, improve, and control. So it could be as short as like a little 6-page report saying, here's what I did for my independent project, okay? And then once you sort of do that, show that to me. Well, for each one of those, I suggest before you do that independent project, turn in a draft project charter to me. So everybody, you know, we all do like a thumbs up that, you know, this is going to be, you know, the right thing to do. And you know, you're not going to get, you know, run into problems or trouble or for whatever we can see at the beginning of the project. And then, so you do that independent project, get that out of the way. Then you would, you know, pay your money. I think the Black Belt project class course is only $750. So once again, we review a draft project charter. You'd pay your money. You'd get in the class. I'd enroll you in MoreSteam Traction, which is a project tracking software. And I can actually sort of show you guys what that looks like right now. But we enroll you in Traction. We track the project, and then at the end of that, you know, you'd have your black belt. Okay. Now, for your black belt, you do have to do within that mentored project, especially, is you need to do a significant statistical analysis, and it could be design of experiments, or it could be something like a multiple regression, but you got to get into at least some sort of heavy-duty form of statistics to show people that you know got that sort of black belt level statistical background. Okay. Let me, since I got you guys on here, let me show you what the MoreSteam Traction looks like. So let's see. Let's go to. Let's see where are we? So MoreSteam, back, account. Okay, so are you guys seeing the my screen now?
No.
No, you're not. Okay, so I just did a stop share. Let me do a share screen, and let's go. Okay, and I think I shared the wrong screen. Hold on a second. Just do it's always safer just to share the whole desktop. Okay, so this is, let me go back here. So when you get enrolled in Traction, so you can see a little instance of Traction on your MoreSteam, products page, if you will. And we're going to go in here. So this is some of the projects that I'm currently looking at. I'm going to turn off the on hold ones. So these are a bunch of projects. And I think I've got one black belt project. Now I'm going to click on Jesse's project here to show you sort of what this looks like. So this is a view of whoop. Let me close this. So this is a view of what the charter page is for a project. So you got some sort of time schedule. It's very much like the manual or the charter you guys filled out for your mini project. You got a problem statement, the business case, problem statement, scope, inclusions, benefits to customers, those sorts of things. You've got some people. I'm the coach. Jesse's the team leader for this. We've got stakeholders. We got some sort of economic impact. I'm going to go on to the summary. So you've got these different phases: the define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. You got a bunch of questions that you have to answer for each one. So, I'm going to say, let's see. What actions have you taken to understand, map the process? So I'm going to click on that and see what Jesse's got here. Come on, there we go. So this is where Jesse, mapped the process, did a process flow map on outages. It says what the answer is. What do you do to answer the question? You did a flow chart, look for logic for the critical path. What lessons are learned? So it's kind of like a mini project, right? You got to say, what the answer is or what the analysis showed, your interpretation, what you actually did, some lesson learned, like the why and the output. You can share files. So this is an image. You also shared a file that I can look at in more detail, see a little bit more clearly. So what I'm looking for in this is I'm looking for in this. I'm going to go back to my summary. So have you answered each one of these questions for each one of these things? These are like the toll gate questions. So once you answer all the defined questions, you send a little, or you hit a button that says submit for define for approval. I review it, give you some feedback. Maybe you fix some things, then eventually I approve and you move on through the project. Okay. So that's it. Any questions on what that is, or does that sort of make sense? Right.
So you're our mentor. It's not someone from MoreSteam.
Right, I would be the mentor, and I'm gonna do that until I get so overloaded that I scream. Right, but right now I've got 10 projects going, and I would sort of hope at one point, one of my dreams is you guys become black belts, and I can throw you a few green belt projects that you can mentor. And I'll slip you a couple $100, and you'll be happy. Okay. So I'm counting on you guys to take me off the hook at some point in the future. Okay. All right. Any other questions for tonight? Okay. Well, that's it. Have a good evening, good weekend, and I will see you guys in 2 weeks. Feel free to reach out if you come across anything or have any questions. Okay. All right. See you guys.